So this is part three of my talk, using your credit card responsibly. So the first tip I'm going to give you is pay off your balance in full every month to avoid paying interest. As I've alluded in my previous talk, is that every credit card will give you a period of usually about 56 days where it's interest free. So if you pay your money you spent within that period, you don't pay any interest. But if you don't pay it within that period, then you will pay the interest on the balance that's left. So a responsible way is paying off in full every month. So usually, if you do this, you will in effect be having interest-free loan every month that you're clearing. The second tip and very important one of using your credit card responsibly is make sure you're using just less than 30% of your credit limit. So let's say, for example, you have a credit limit of £2,000 on your credit card. 30% will be about £600. So make sure you're using, on average, less than £600 every month. Um, of course, there are months you may find yourself using more than that, but that could be okay so long as on average you're keeping it under 30%. We call that the credit utilization ratio. And the reason why it's important, again, is because remember our story of Josh and his three friends. When lenders are looking at your credit report and they see that you're spending so much of your credit limit, let's say you're spending almost 100%, you have 2,000 and you're spending 2,000 every month, the message it sends to the lender looking at your credit report is that you depend so much on your credit card. So you're depending so much on loans, and somebody who depends so much on loans does not look like looks very risky to a lender. They want somebody who does not depend so much on credit, because if every month you need 100% of your credit limit, what it looks like is that you are very, very risky. You're not able to survive without loans. So the third thing is never miss a payment. I mean, this is self-explanatory. Remember Donald in our story, the person who never keeps their word. They say they'll pay in 3 weeks, but pay 3 months later. So never miss a payment. If you don't miss a payment, if you miss a payment, there are two things that happen. Of course, you will have to pay back with a very high interest rate. Most credit cards have very high interest rates, but number two, you're also creating a bad credit history, and so it damages your credit history and your credit score if you're missing payments. At the very worst case scenario, and this I'm saying as worst case scenario, it shouldn't be happening, but worst case scenario, if you cannot pay back the balance in your credit card, then at least pay the minimum balance. The credit card always has a minimum balance, the minimum amount that you should pay every month. Make sure you're paying that minimum balance. Of course, my strong belief is you should be paying back the complete balance every month. This is just worst case scenario, paying back the minimum. Then number four, another tip is use a rewards card. So rewards card, other than the benefit of getting financing from a credit card and creating a credit history, rewards card will also give you discounts and save your money in other ways. So usually if you can find a rewards card, I mean it's not always possible, especially if it's your first credit card that you're applying for. If you can find a rewards card, well then you could use it. And the final one is just a tip that I think is useful. Use the card for your needs, not your wants. Some people forget that the money in the credit card is not their money, and so they think they can use it every way, anyhow they want it. I always say that if you are not going to be able to afford whatever you want to pay with your credit card, then you should give it a hard think before you do it. Just use your credit card to pay for things you can afford. You would have been buying anyway, with or without the credit card. But that's my personal opinion. So, what things affect your credit history or your credit score or your ability to get a credit? The first one, of course, is very obvious. Missing payments on your card. If you're not paying, then you look like Donald in our story. People don't trust you when you will want a mortgage. The lenders will be very, uh, will look at you as a very risky person, risky borrower, and they will not be willing to give to you, or they give you very high interest loans. High credit utilization ratio. I think I've explained this previously. If you're using so much of the money on your credit limit, you look like you depend so much on credit, and therefore, again, lenders don't like to see that. Hard credit searches. Now, I have to explain this. Just a quick explanation. So, every time you're applying for a credit card or some form of loans, then the companies who are assessing your application will look at your credit file. So when they're looking at your credit file, they will look at a very detail, look at it in detail, and this is called a hard credit search. You can also do a credit search on your own. You can look at there are websites that do that, and when you do it, it's not as detailed as when the lenders are trying to look at your credit history. So the difference is if you do a personal credit search, it does not leave a stamp or a record that somebody searched your file. And that is called a soft credit search. So you can do it every day and nobody will ever notice that somebody looked at your credit file. However, if let's say a mortgage company or a credit card company looks at your file, they will not look at it without your permission, of course. So if they look at your file, it leaves a stamp. I just call it a stamp. It leaves a record that on this particular date, a certain company looked at your file. And so if there are so many companies looking at your file, it means you are trying to look for loans from so many people, and therefore other lenders will be looking at your file and wondering, why is this person busy looking for loans everywhere? Why are there so many hard credit searches on his file? There's so many people he's trying to borrow from. Therefore, you look like a risky person again. So it affects your ability to get credit and affects your credit score. Collection searches. When debt collectors also want to collect debt, they will look at your finance, your credit file, and this also leaves some evidence that some debt collectors looked at your file. And of course, another lender will look at it and say, oh, there's some debt collectors who've been looking at his file. Therefore, he probably is not a reliable person. Court judgments. Usually they are county court judgments. So if you owe someone money and the court has ruled that you have to pay back, then this kind of things will affect your ability to get credit. Electoral roll, this one is again very important for people who've come to the UK. If you come to the UK and you are a newcomer, you've just started settling in, you need to register in the electoral roll. That is if you qualify. So that you can just Google it online how to register to the electoral roll and you become a voter, UK voter. The reason why this affects your ability to get credit is because the credit companies, the lenders, the mortgage lenders, and all manner of credit companies, people who give money to borrowers, depend on the electoral roll, or they look at the electoral roll to verify your details, so your name, your address, and that kind of thing. So if you have not yet registered as a voter in the UK, just Google electoral roll registration and you'll follow the procedure and enter your details and enter into the electoral roll. So what the reason why it will affect your credit or your ability to get credit is if you're, let's say, number one, it's used to verify your identity. So if you're not in this electoral roll, it becomes harder to identify you, and there's identity theft issues and all manner of fraud. But aside from that, if you've also been changing addresses very frequently, then I mean, for me, I think this is an unfair thing, but it's apparently it happens that the, the the perception is that you're probably not very settled, and lenders want somebody who's very settled because if you're changing addresses every other time, then what it looks like is probably you're not able to afford rent wherever you're living, or you know, I mean, for me, I think it's actually a very absurd thing that the whether or not you're in the electoral roll matters, but unfortunately, it does matter. So make sure you're in it if you want to have a good credit score. And finally, how long you've lived in the UK. So if you've ever tried to buy, let's say, a phone or electronics online or even in store, you've probably seen option of paying for it in bits slowly. Unfortunately, if you've not lived here for 3 years, you are not usually qualified to, let's say, if it's an iPhone that costs £1,000, you could pay for it for £20 per month, for example. I'm just using an example, but if you've not lived in the UK for 3 years, then that kind of loan is not accessible to you simply because, again, you don't have a credit history. You're like Brandy in our story. People don't know you, people don't trust you, and they don't know. I mean, the lenders, sorry, I'm not really people, but the lenders, they don't have enough history to trust you with. Yeah, so those are the things that can affect your credit score or your ability to get credit. And again, if you are thinking of one day in future taking credit for whatever thing you want to take credit for, maybe some crazy dream car or a dream house, you want to stop paying rent and live in your own house, then you want to have a good credit, and all these things will help you, and the credit card becomes an important part of building your credit score and credit history. Thank you for listening. Any questions you have, please put them in the comment box. And in the last part of this talk, I will just discuss how you can apply for a credit card. It will be a quick one, I think, and I promise. Well, I'm not promising, I just think it will be a brief one. Thank you for listening.